In the heart of the mighty Roman Empire, where power was a spectacle played out in grand forums and before roaring crowds, emperors were gods among men. They lived, ruled, and died in the center of the world, Rome itself, surrounded by the whispers of senators, the steel of their legions, and the adoration of the masses. Their lives were public theater. But imagine an emperor who turned his back on it all. An emperor who abandoned the magnificent palaces and the bustling streets of Rome to rule from a secluded, cliff-top villa on a remote island. This is the story of Tiberius, the successor to the great Augustus, and his mysterious, self-imposed exile on the island of Capri. What drove a man at the pinnacle of power to retreat from the world, he commanded? Was it a desire for peace, a weariness of the political games, or something far more sinister? For 10 long years, from 27 to 37, the Roman Empire was governed by messages sent from this tiny speck of land in the Bay of Naples. As Tiberius disappeared behind the veil of his island fortress, Rome was left to wonder, to gossip, and to fear. The city that had once been the emperor's stage became a breeding ground for rumors, each more shocking than the last. Stories began to trickle back from Capri's of paranoia, cruelty, and debauchery so extreme they seemed to belong to a world of nightmares, not the annals of history. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the most enigmatic and disturbing chapters of ancient Rome. We will explore the man, the island, and the legends that have shrouded the name of Tiberius in infamy for 2 millennia. This isn't just a story about a reclusive ruler. It's a chilling exploration of what happens when absolute power is combined with absolute isolation, when the checks and balances of public life are removed, and a leader is left alone with his darkest impulses. Was Tiberius a misunderstood and grieving old man, or was he the monster that history has painted him to be? Join us as we journey to the island of Capri to uncover the truth behind the emperor who ruled from the shadows. To understand Tiberius's retreat, we must first understand the man himself. Tiberius Claudius Nero was never supposed to be emperor. He was a brilliant military commander, known for his strategic mind and his stoic, reserved demeanor. He was the stepson of Augustus, the first Roman emperor, and his early life was marked by political turmoil and personal tragedy. He was forced by Augustus to divorce the woman he loved, Vipsania, and marry Augustus's own daughter, Julia, a union that proved to be disastrous and loveless. Despite his military successes and his loyalty, he was often sidelined in the line of succession in favor of Augustus's more direct descendants. One by one, however, fate intervened. Augustus's chosen heirs, his grandsons Gaius and Lucius, died young. Tiberius, the reluctant heir, was finally adopted and named successor. When he ascended to the throne at the age of 54, he was already a weary and embittered man. The Roman people and the Senate found him difficult to read. He was not like the charismatic Augustus. He was grim, frugal, and disdainful of the flattery and ceremony that came with his position. He often clashed with the Senate, viewing them with suspicion and contempt. His early reign was marked by a sense of duty and competent administration, but also by a growing paranoia. This was fueled by the treacherous ambitions of his own praetorian prefect, a man who would become the emperor's only confidant and, ultimately, his greatest betrayer. It was in this atmosphere of distrust and political intrigue that Tiberius made his fateful decision in 26 AD to leave Rome, never to return. His chosen refuge was Capri, a stunningly beautiful island known for its dramatic cliffs, hidden grottos, and panoramic views of the sea. It was the perfect fortress. Accessible from only a few landing points, it was easy to defend and control. Here, Tiberius built 12 magnificent villas, the most famous of which was the Villa Hobis, or the Villa of Jupiter. Perched atop the island's highest peak, it was a sprawling complex of royal quarters, baths, and terraces that served as the new center of the Roman Empire. From this isolated perch, Tiberius communicated with the Senate through messengers, his orders shaping the lives of millions. But while the official business of the empire continued, what was happening behind the villa's walls? This is where history gives way to a darker, more disturbing narrative, primarily shaped by historians like Suetonius and Tacitus, who wrote decades after Tiberius's death. According to these sources, Capri was not a place of peaceful retirement. It was a private kingdom of depravity. Suetonius, in particular, paints a lurid picture of an aging emperor descending into monstrous behavior, free from the public eye. He wrote of secret chambers designed for unspeakable acts, of Tiberius surrounding himself with individuals who catered to his cruelest whims. The stories are shocking. He described how Tiberius would force people to perform in perverse plays, and how he would indulge in pleasures that horrified even the notoriously liberal Roman society. The Villa Hobis, with its dramatic cliff-edge location, became the setting for his ultimate cruelty. It was rumored that those who displeased the emperor they failed performers, clumsy servants, or political messengers bearing bad news, were summarily executed by being thrown from the cliffs into the sea below. A group of sailors was supposedly stationed in the waters to beat the victims with oars and boat hooks, ensuring no one survived the fall. This spot is still known today as the Salto di Tiberio, or Tiberius's Leap. But how much of this is true? We must be cautious. Historians like Suetonius and Tacitus were writing for a specific audience and with a specific agenda. They were members of the senatorial class, a group that Tiberius had openly despised and who despised him in return. Their accounts are filled with innuendo and sensationalism, designed to portray the emperors they disliked in the worst possible light. It's possible that the stories were exaggerated political propaganda, created to tarnish the legacy of a difficult and unpopular ruler. There are no first-hand accounts from Capri itself, only these later, hostile narratives. Tiberius's isolation created a vacuum, and into that vacuum, his enemies poured their darkest imaginings. However, we cannot dismiss the stories entirely. Power corrupts, and absolute power combined with total isolation can be a terrifying thing. During his time on Capri, Tiberius's paranoia reached fever pitch. He orchestrated the downfall of his once trusted advisor, who had been plotting to seize power in Rome. The fallout from Sejanus's conspiracy was a brutal wave of treason, trials, and executions. Letters from Capri ordered the deaths of dozens of senators and their families. The terror that gripped Rome was very real, even if the emperor was hundreds of miles away. It's plausible that a man capable of such cold, calculated political purges was also capable of personal cruelties. The silence from Capri was deafening, allowing fear and speculation to run wild. The emperor became a bogeyman, an unseen monster whose wrath could strike at any moment. What we can say for certain is that Tiberius' retreat was a disaster for his reputation and a dark turning point for the Roman Principate. By removing the emperor from the public sphere, he broke the unspoken contract between the ruler and the ruled. An emperor was supposed to be a public figure, the first citizen. Tiberius became a phantom, a disembodied voice of authority ruling from a pleasure palace. This set a dangerous precedent. It showed that the empire could be governed from a distance, by a single individual accountable to no one, his actions hidden from view. His successor would be Caligula, a young man who had spent part of his adolescence on Capri with Tiberius. Many historians believe that the environment of fear, paranoia, and possible debauchery on that island profoundly shaped the man who would become one of Rome's most infamous tyrants. The legacy of Capri was not just the story of one emperor's descent, but the seeds of another's. When Tiberius finally died in 37 AD at the age of 77, the news was met with jubilation in Rome. The citizens celebrated in the streets, shouting Tiberius to the Tiber, a call to throw his body into the river like a common criminal. His legacy was sealed. He would be remembered not as the brilliant general or the competent, if grim, administrator, but as the monster of Capri. For centuries, his story has served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the darkness that can fester in the human heart when it is removed from the light of public accountability. So, as we look back on the story of Tiberius, we are left with a fascinating and unsettling mystery. Was he truly the depraved tyrant of legend, or was he a victim of history? A tired, bitter old man whose enemies used his reclusiveness to destroy his name. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. The real story of Capri may be less about the specific acts that did or did not happen, and more about the corrosive nature of isolation and suspicion. It is a timeless reminder that leaders who cut themselves off from their people risk becoming lost not only to their subjects, but to themselves. The tale of Tiberius and his island of secrets is a chilling chapter in the human story, proving that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we can no longer see. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're rediving deep into the life of one of Rome's most enigmatic and controversial emperors, Tiberius. He was the man who followed the legendary Augustus, a tough act to follow by any measure. But Tiberius was no slouch. He was a brilliant military commander, a seasoned administrator, and by all accounts, incredibly intelligent. So, why did his reign, which started with so much promise, end with him as a bitter recluse, ruling the world's greatest empire from a remote island villa? Let's find out. Tiberius Claudius Nero was born into a prestigious Roman family. His life took a dramatic turn when his mother, Livia, divorced his father and married Octavian, the man who would soon become Emperor Augustus. Suddenly, Tiberius was part of the Imperial family, a position that came with immense pressure and opportunity. He proved his worth time and again on the battlefield, securing Rome's northern frontiers and earning a reputation as a masterful general. He was disciplined, efficient, and respected by his soldiers. But despite his successes, he was never Augustus's first choice for an heir. The emperor favored his own grandsons, but one by one, tragedy struck, and they all died young. Reluctantly, Augustus adopted Tiberius, paving the way for his succession. When Augustus died in 1480, the 55-year-old Tiberius became the second emperor of Rome. Initially, he was a model ruler. He respected the Senate, managed the empire's finances with caution and skill, and maintained peace and stability across the provinces. He was known for his dislike of excessive luxury and his emphasis on justice and order. He even refused grand titles and honors, trying to project an image of a humble public servant rather than an absolute monarch. For the first decade of his reign, things seemed to be going well. Rome was prosperous, and the empire was secure. But beneath this calm surface, Tiberius's personality was beginning to clash with the demands of his role. He was a deeply private and reserved man, often described as gloomy and suspicious. Unlike the charismatic Augustus, Tiberius struggled with the public-facing aspects of being emperor. He hated the flattery and political games of the Roman elite. This social awkwardness was often misinterpreted as arrogance, and he quickly became unpopular with both the Senate and the people of Rome. His relationship with his own mother, the formidable Livia, was also strained. She had schemed for decades to put him on the throne, and now she expected to rule alongside him, an arrangement Tiberius would not tolerate. This constant tension at home and in the Senate only deepened his inherent suspicion of those around him. The real turning point in his reign came with the rise of a man named Sejanus. Lucius Aelius Sejanus was the ambitious commander of the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguards. Tiberius, growing increasingly weary of his duties in Rome, came to rely heavily on Sejanus, giving him more and more power. Sejanus became his right-hand man, his trusted confidant, and effectively, the co-ruler of the empire. This trust was dangerously misplaced. While Tiberius grew more isolated, Sejanus began a ruthless campaign to eliminate his own rivals and position himself as the emperor's successor. He orchestrated a series of treason trials that created a climate of fear and paranoia in Rome, with many prominent senators being executed on trumped-up charges. In 26, Tiberius made a decision that would forever define his reign. He left Rome for good. He retreated to the beautiful island of Capri, off the coast of Naples, and never set foot in the capital again. From his luxurious clifftop villa, he ruled the empire by sending letters and decrees, leaving the day-to-day administration in the hands of the treacherous Sejanus. Ancient historians, writing decades later, filled this period with sensational tales of depravity and cruelty, painting Tiberius as a monstrous tyrant, indulging in unspeakable acts while hidden away from public view. While many of these stories were likely exaggerated propaganda, his absence created a power vacuum in Rome that was filled with terror and uncertainty. The endgame for Sejanus came in 31 AD. Tiberius finally received credible information that his trusted prefect was plotting to overthrow him. In a masterful stroke of political maneuvering, Tiberius sent a secret letter to the Senate. As it was being read aloud, the senators first believed it was a letter promoting Sejanus to an even higher position. But as the reading continued, the tone shifted, and it ended with a denunciation of Sejanus as a traitor and an order for his arrest. The senators, who had feared Sejanus for years, immediately turned on him. He was arrested, executed, and his body was torn apart by the Roman mob. The purge that followed was brutal, as Tiberius, now consumed by paranoia, unleashed his vengeance on anyone associated with Caesar. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a story of power, paranoia, and one of the most famous getaways in history. We're talking about the Roman Emperor Tiberius and his mysterious retreat to the stunning island of Capri. What could possibly make a man at the height of his power abandon the very center of the universe, the city of Rome, for a remote island? The answer is a lot more complex and darker than you might think. Imagine being Tiberius. You're the successor to the legendary Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The expectations are astronomical. The city of Rome is a buzzing, chaotic hive of ambition. Every day, you're surrounded by senators who might be plotting against you, generals who might want your throne, and a public that's always watching, always judging. The pressure is relentless. Every decision is scrutinized. Every public appearance is a performance, and every whisper in the corridors of power could be a threat. Tiberius wasn't like his predecessor. He was a seasoned military commander, respected for his skills on the battlefield. But he was also a deeply private and suspicious man. He loathed the insincere flattery and the endless political games of the Roman elite. He saw conspiracy around every corner, and frankly, he wasn't always wrong. Rome was a snake pit, and Tiberius felt the fangs closing in. He had endured personal tragedies, political betrayals, and the constant, crushing weight of imperial responsibility. He was tired of it all. He craved an escape, and that's where Capri comes in. This small, rugged island off the coast of Naples was the perfect solution. It wasn't just a vacation spot, it was a fortress. Capri offered Tiberius something Rome could never give him: isolation. From his magnificent villas perched on the cliffs, he could look out over the Bay of Naples, feeling the sea breeze, far away from the grasping hands and watchful eyes of the Senate. The island was accessible only by boat, making it incredibly easy to control who came and went. It was his personal sanctuary, his command center, and his gilded cage, all in one. From this remote paradise, Tiberius continued to rule the vast Roman Empire. Messages and decrees were ferried back and forth by boat. He could govern without having to face the people he distrusted, without the daily performances of public life. He could be the emperor, but on his own terms. However, this isolation also fueled the darkest rumors about him, with no witnesses to contradict them. Tales of his cruelty and debauchery grew to legendary proportions. Historians like Tacitus and Suetonius wrote sensational accounts of his life on the island, painting a picture of a monstrous tyrant indulging in unspeakable acts, hidden away from the world. Was Tiberius a monster, or was he a weary and paranoid old man who just wanted to be left alone? The truth is probably somewhere in between. His move to Capri wasn't just a simple retirement. It was a radical act of self-reservation. It was the desperate choice of a man who ruled the world, but could he untrust a single soul in it? He chose to govern from a distance, surrounded by the sea instead of senators, effectively creating a barrier between himself and the world he was supposed to lead. The story of Tiberius on Capri is a fascinating look into the psychology of power and the personal cost of being an emperor. It shows how even the most powerful person on earth can be driven by fear, mistrust, and a deep desire for solitude. The beautiful island of Capri, known today as a luxury destination, holds the secrets of one of Rome's most enigmatic and controversial rulers. What do you think? Was Tiberius a wise ruler seeking peace, or a paranoid tyrant hiding from his duties? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Imagine an island so beautiful it could be a dream, but so isolated it could become a prison. This is the story of Capri, the island retreat of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, a place of breathtaking beauty that concealed a dark and complex history. For centuries, Capri has enchanted visitors with its dramatic cliffs plunging into the impossibly blue Tyrrhenian Sea. It's a maze of hidden grottos, sun-drenched piazzas, and winding paths fragrant with bougainvillea and lemon trees. It's easy to see why someone would want to escape to this paradise. And in the 1st century AD, the most powerful man in the world, Emperor Tiberius, died Hustad. Tiberius was the successor to the great Augustus. He was a seasoned military commander, a capable administrator, but he was also a man who grew weary of Rome's political games. He sought refuge, a place where he could rule from a distance, surrounded by beauty and insulated from his enemies. He chose Capri. But his retreat wasn't just a simple vacation. It was a strategic relocation of power. He built not just one, but 12 magnificent villas across the island, each one a testament to Roman engineering and luxury. The most famous of these was Villa Hobbies, or the Villa of Jupiter. Perched atop a sheer 1,000-foot cliff, it was more of a fortress than a home. From this vantage point, Tiberius could see all the way to the mainland. Signal fires could relay messages across the bay, allowing him to govern the vast Roman Empire from his island sanctuary. Access to Capri was strictly controlled. Only those summoned by the emperor could make the journey. The island's natural defenses, its steep cliffs and treacherous waters, were enhanced by Tiberius's personal guard. It was said that once you arrived on Capri, you were entirely at the emperor's mercy. Few could enter without an invitation, and it was rumored that even fewer could leave without his permission. The island became his personal kingdom, a world within a world where his word was the only law. But what really happened in those villas? Roman historians like Tacitus and Suetonius painted a scandalous picture. They wrote of lavish parties, unspeakable debauchery, and cruel paranoia. They describe an aging emperor, haunted by conspiracies, who would sentence people to death on a whim. One of the most infamous legends involves the Tiberius's Leap, the very cliff where Villa Hubis stood. The story goes that those who displeased the emperor were simply thrown from the cliff into the sea below. Are these stories true? It's hard to say. Tacitus and Suetonius were writing decades after Tiberius's death, and they were part of a senatorial class that had a complicated relationship with the emperors. They may have exaggerated the tales to tarnish his reputation. Tiberius was certainly a stern and reclusive ruler, and his long absence from Rome bred suspicion and rumor. Capri, with its isolation and inaccessibility, became the perfect canvas onto which his political enemies could paint their darkest accusations. Archaeological evidence tells a slightly different story. The ruins of Villa Hobbies show a complex that was not just a pleasure palace, but also a fully functioning administrative center. It had living quarters, baths, cisterns to collect rainwater, and of course, the Imperial apartments with their stunning views. It was the White House of its day, just relocated to a remote island. Whether Tiberius's Capri was a den of depravity or simply a fortified seat of government, one thing is certain: it was a place of absolute power. For the last decade of his life, Tiberius never set foot in Rome again. He ruled the world from his clifftop palace, surrounded by the sea and his own secrets. The beauty of the island was the backdrop for a reign shrouded in mystery. Today, you can visit the ruins of Villa Hobbies. As you stand on that same cliff, looking out at the endless blue water, it's easy to feel the echoes of the past. You can almost imagine the weight of an empire being shouldered from this very spot, and you can't help but wonder about the man who chose this beautiful, lonely paradise as his final home. Capri was his fortress, his refuge, and ultimately, his gilded cage. Imagine a place where one person holds absolute, unquestionable power. A place so remote, so isolated, that the normal rules of society simply vanish. This isn't a fantasy novel. This was the reality for the Roman Emperor Tiberius on the island of Capri. For 10 long years, from 27 to 37 AD, Tiberius ruled the most powerful empire in the world, from this tiny, rocky outcrop in the Bay of Naples. And what happened there serves as a timeless, chilling lesson about what happens when power has no limits. To understand the story of Capri, you first have to understand Tiberius himself. He wasn't born to be emperor. He was a brilliant military general, a stern and traditional Roman, who found himself thrust onto the throne late in life. For the first part of his reign in Rome, he tried to be a fair and just ruler. He respected the Senate, he listened to advice, and he seemed genuinely concerned with the well-being of the empire. But the politics of Rome were a snake pit of conspiracies, betrayals, and constant pressure. Tiberius grew weary, paranoid, and disillusioned with it all. So, at the age of 67, he did something unprecedented. He left Rome. He abandoned the heart of his own empire and retreated to Capri, a place he had fallen in love with years earlier. He built 12 magnificent villas across the island, the most famous being the Villa Hobbies, perched atop a sheer cliff, offering breathtaking views and impenetrable security. From this fortress in the sky, he would govern the Roman Empire through letters and messengers. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. On Capri, something fundamental changed. Back in Rome, Tiberius was still, to some extent, accountable. The Senate, while weakened, still existed. Public opinion, though fickle, was a force to be reckoned with. There were traditions, laws, and the ever-present eyes of the Roman elite watching his every move. On Capri, all of that was gone. There was no Senate peering over his shoulder. There were no crowds to please or appease. There were no laws that could truly reach the emperor in his island fortress. There was only one thing: total, absolute obedience from everyone around him. And when power has no limits, human behavior can change in terrifying ways. The ancient historians, like Suetonius and Tacitus, paint a grim picture of life on Capri. They describe an aging emperor, consumed by suspicion and fear, who gave in to his darkest impulses. The island, once a beautiful retreat, allegedly became a private stage for his cruelty and debauchery. Stories circulated of elaborate tortures, of enemies and perceived threats being thrown from the cliffs of Villa Hobis into the sea below. The man who once preached traditional Roman values was now accused of indulging in every forbidden pleasure, far from the public eye. Now, we have to be careful. These historians were writing with their own agendas, and some of the more lurid tales might be exaggerations designed to tarnish Tiberius's legacy. But the core of the story, the underlying truth, remains powerful. The isolation of Capri created a bubble, a world where the normal checks and balances on power ceased to exist. In this vacuum, the emperor's paranoia festered. His word was law, his whims were commands, and his fears became death sentences for others. The distance from Rome didn't just give him security, it gave him impunity. The story of Tiberius on Capri is more than just ancient history. It's a profound psychological study. It shows us that even a disciplined, capable leader can be warped by the intoxicating effect of absolute authority, combined with isolation. It's a warning that has echoed through the centuries, a reminder that systems of accountability, transparency, and law are not just formalities. They are the essential guardrails that protect society from the potential darkness that lies within unchecked power. The beautiful island of Capri stands today as a popular tourist destination, but beneath its sunny exterior lies the shadow of a forgotten emperor and a timeless lesson about the corruption. Ever wondered what happens when the most powerful man in the world just disappears? Imagine if the president or a king suddenly packed his bags, moved to a remote island, and ruled the entire empire from there, surrounded by nothing but cliffs and the sea. It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel, right? Well, it actually happened. This is the story of the Roman Emperor Tiberius and his mysterious 10-year retreat to the island of Capri. For centuries, Rome had been the heart of the world, the center of power, politics, and culture. Every emperor before Tiberius lived and ruled from the Palatine Hill, in the very core of the city. But in the year 27 AD, Tiberius, at the age of 67, did the unthinkable. He left Rome and never set foot in the city again for the last decade of his life. He chose the tiny, beautiful, but incredibly isolated island of Capri as his new home and headquarters. Why? That's the question that has fascinated historians for 2,000 years. Was he tired of the endless political backstabbing in the Roman Senate? Was he heartbroken over personal tragedies? Or was there a darker, more sinister reason for his self-imposed exile? To understand Tiberius's shocking decision, we need to look at the man himself. He was never supposed to be emperor. He was the stepson of the great Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Tiberius was a brilliant military general, respected for his discipline and success on the battlefield, but he was also known for being gloomy, reserved, and deeply private. He seemed uncomfortable with the flattery and public life that came with being part of the imperial family. He even exiled himself once before, long before he became emperor, to the island of Rhodes, seemingly fed up with it all, but fate had other plans. One by one, Augustus's preferred heirs died, until only Tiberius was left. So, reluctantly, he took the throne. For the first part of his reign, he was actually a pretty decent emperor. He managed the empire's finances well, respected the Senate, and avoided costly wars. But the pressure of ruling, combined with constant conspiracies and family drama, started to wear him down. The final straw seems to have been the betrayal by his own right-hand man, Sejanus, who was secretly plotting to seize power. It was around this time that Tiberius decided to leave Rome for good. Capri was the perfect escape. It was a private property of the emperor, easily defensible with its sheer cliffs, and far from the prying eyes of the Roman elite. From a grand villa known as Villa Hobis, perched atop a cliff with a breathtaking view of the Bay of Naples, Tiberius ruled the vast Roman Empire through messengers and letters. Imagine that. Decrees that affected millions from Britain to Syria were being issued from this remote island hideaway. Now, here's where the story takes a dark turn. What really happened on that island? Our main sources, ancient historians like Suetonius and Tacitus, paint a very grim picture. They wrote their accounts decades after Tiberius's death, and they weren't exactly fans. They described Capri not as a peaceful retreat, but as a den of depravity. They filled their pages with sensational stories of wild parties, unspeakable cruelties, and paranoia. According to these writers, Tiberius's paranoia grew to epic proportions. He built a network of spies and informers. Anyone suspected of treason was dealt with ruthlessly. There's a famous cliff on Capri, still called Tiberius's Leap, where he supposedly had his victims thrown into the sea after long sessions of torture. They claimed the island was filled with astrologers, bizarre entertainers, and people who catered to his darkest whims. But how much of this is true, and how much is just gossip and political propaganda? Remember, these historians were writing for a new dynasty of emperors who wanted to make their predecessors look bad. It's hard to separate fact from fiction. Tiberius was an old, bitter man who had been betrayed multiple times. It's very likely he became more suspicious and cruel in his later years. But was he the monster the ancient sources describe? Modern archaeologists have excavated Villa Hobis, and what they've found is a massive, functional complex. It was more like a fortified administrative center than a palace of pleasure. It had large water cisterns, quarters for a huge staff, an imperial guard, and a lighthouse to send signals to the mainland. It was the command center of the Roman world. This suggests that while Tiberius had indeed withdrawn from public life, he was still very much in charge of the empire. So, we're left with two conflicting images of Tiberius on Capri. Was he a weary old ruler seeking peace and quiet, governing responsibly from a distance? Or was he a paranoid tyrant, indulging in secret horrors while the empire held its breath? The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. His retreat to Capri was likely driven by a mix of exhaustion with politics, genuine fear for his safety, and a deep-seated desire for privacy. But this isolation, cut off from real-world feedback, probably amplified his worst traits. His suspicion, his cruelty, and his detachment from the people he ruled. Tiberius's story is a powerful reminder of how absolute power can corrupt, and how isolation can warp even the strongest minds. The beautiful island of Capri, a popular tourist destination today, still holds the echoes of this dark and mysterious chapter in Roman history, forever linked to the emperor who ruled the world from its cliffs. Have you ever wondered what secrets lie buried in the dust of ancient Rome? We often picture grand amphitheaters and stoic emperors, but beneath the surface of this mighty empire, there are stories so disturbing they sound like something from a horror movie. Today, we're diving into one of the most chilling tales from Roman history, a story that involves an emperor, a secluded island, and a cryptic term that hides a horrifying truth: the small fish of Capri. This isn't just a story about ancient scandals. It's a deep look into the absolute corruption that comes with absolute power. We'll be exploring the writings of ancient historians like Suetonius and Tacitus, men who chronicled the lives of the Caesars. They wrote about Emperor Tiberius, who succeeded the famous Augustus. In his later years, Tiberius retreated from Rome to the beautiful, isolated island of Capri. It was there, far from the public eye, that unimaginable things were said to have happened. Our journey begins with a term that, on the surface, sounds innocent, pisciculi, which is Latin for small fish or minnows. But in the context of Tiberius's private life on Capri, this word takes on a sinister meaning. Ancient authors used it to describe young boys who were forced to entertain the emperor in his swimming pools and grottos. The historian Suetonius paints a graphic picture, one that has shocked readers for centuries. He claimed Tiberius trained these children to swim between his legs, nipping and nibbling at him like little fish. Now, It's crucial to approach these ancient sources with a critical eye. Roman historians, especially Suetonius, loved sensationalism. They often wrote to entertain as much as to inform, and they weren't above exaggerating rumors to make a point or to tarnish an emperor's reputation. Think of them as the tabloid journalists of their day. Their goal wasn't always to present a factual, unbiased account. Often, their writing was a form of political commentary, a warning about the dangers of unchecked authority. So, did Tiberius really have a grotto full of children he called his minnows? The literal truth is hard to prove 2,000 years later. We don't have security footage from the Blue Grotto, but whether the story is literally true down to the last detail is almost beside the point. The emperor held the power of life and death over everyone in the empire. The story illustrates this power dynamic in its most intimate and disturbing form. The children are not seen as human beings. They are objectified, turned into props for the emperor's amusement, dehumanized to the level of animals. This dehumanization is a key theme. When those in power stop seeing the humanity in others, the door opens to all kinds of atrocities. The authors who wrote these accounts were trying to warn their readers. While the physical evidence can't confirm the specific activities described by Suetonius, it does confirm the setting. It shows a world of extreme luxury and privacy, a perfect stage for the kind of debauchery the ancient writers described. The opulence of the villas stands in stark contrast to the moral ugliness of the stories associated with them. Illustration of the adage that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It highlights the vulnerability of children and the way they can be exploited by those in positions of trust and authority. This theme, unfortunately, is timeless. The abuse of power and the exploitation of the vulnerable are not confined to ancient Rome. The specific details of the small fish story might be a product of their time, but the underlying message resonates through history. Who first heard this story would have been shocked, not just by the act itself, but by what it represented. It was a betrayal of Roman ideals. An emperor was supposed to embody virtue, discipline, and public service. Tiberius, in these tales, embodies the exact opposite: private indulgence, cruelty, and a complete disregard for human dignity. That's why the story was so effective as propaganda, and that's why it has fascinated and horrified people for millennia. In conclusion, the story of Tiberius and his small fish is more than just a lurid piece of ancient gossip. Looking past the sensationalism, we find a stark warning about what can happen when a leader retreats from public duty into a private world where there are no rules. It's a dark chapter in Roman history, but one that holds important lessons for us all. The small fish may have been a metaphor, but the abuse of power they represented was all too real. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of ancient Rome's darkest secrets. If you found this fascinating, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the hidden corners of history. Let me know in the comments what you think was Suetonius telling the truth, or was it all just a smear campaign? Until next time, stay curious.